What's going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, I think you already can tell what we are going to be taking a look at. We are going to be taking a look at the Apple AirPods Max. Now, I'm just going to give a little forewarning that this is going to be a long video, and it's going to be a little bit of a rant, especially more towards the end. So you're going to have to be in for the long haul with this one, but there is a lot to talk about regarding the AirPods Max. And I did purchase this myself. I did have the opportunity when this was first announced to buy one online, but I honestly didn't think that these would become as controversial as they ended up becoming. So luckily one of my local Apple stores happened to get a shipment in, and I went and picked this up in person, and yeah, so I have purchased this for this review, so you can get my thoughts on the AirPods Max. So the AirPods Max, in case you have been living under a rock recently, is Apple's new Bluetooth active noise canceling headphone. And it has become quite the controversial product among the internet. I think it's become controversial in two ways among the normie tech YouTubers and tech consumer space, and then the audiophile space. I'm mostly going to cover this from the audiophile perspective in terms of this review, but I will touch a little bit on the normie consumer aspects of this in the rant section. So let's just talk about specs real quick. So Apple gives really no specs about this at all. So the two things to note about this are its price, which is $550, and then its weight, which is 384 grams. So I'm going to go ahead and roll through everything here at the beginning, and then we'll start the rant after I finish talking about the build and the sound. So starting off with the build on the AirPods Max, which means we have to talk about the case. So the case is this, the purse, as the internet has deemed it. You know, it carried around, looks like a purse, and yeah, it's pretty much a dead meme already at this point. But anyway, so the case is the same type of vinyl material as the iPad Magic Keyboard. If you've ever felt one of those, that's exactly what this material is. And it just is a little magnetic thing, and it's meant to keep the cups from getting scratched, at least for the most part, but they are still definitely exposed on the top and the bottom edges, as you can see. And then the other big glaring problem with this case is that the charging port does not line up with the hole on the case. And yeah, that's pretty bad look in my opinion. Hopefully Apple will address this with like down the line in production, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did not. So yeah, that's kind of weird. So once we open up the case, this shows off one of the first big problems with their build, which is, I'm sure as you could hear it, the cups like to smack into each other, which is a bit weird. So as you can see, these things have a ton of clamp, and I'm not gonna let the cups smack into each other. But if I let go, you can see they want to smack into each other. And yeah, so every time you pull these out of the case, you need to put your fingers there to catch them, or else they smack into each other and will scratch. So yeah, be very, very careful with that. That is not great. So as for the rest of the build on the AirPods Max, it is pretty much uniquely Apple, being really good overall with a couple of oversights. The biggest one, of course, is what I just showed you with the charging port and the cups smacking into each other. But as for other aspects of the build, you have aluminum cups, and this is one of, I believe, 5 colors. So this is space gray. There's also silver. There's blue, which is my favorite color that these are made in. There's also green, and there's like a pink red color. I think most people are probably going to go with the black or the silver, but blue, trust me, blue is the best color. If the store I bought these from had blue, I would have gotten blue. But anyway, the cups are aluminum, and this is like the standard Apple aluminum. You know, if you've ever held an Apple product that's aluminum, you know what this feels like. And then you have your sliders, which are metal, and then you have your headband, which is covered in silicone. And then we have the top headband here. Now, the top headband is one of the best design features of this headphone. So what essentially Apple did here was try to make a suspension headband that doesn't look dumb. So with a traditional suspension headband, you know, like the Hyphaman or Odyssey style, for example, you have, you know, your rods. You'll have 2 rods like this, and then you'll have a slider with a strap that hangs below the top part of the headband, and your head will sit on the strap, and then you have that gap, and then you have the two rods that stick up above it. And a lot of people think that looks kind of dumb. I think it's become a little bit more common now and accepted in the mainstream because there are some gaming headsets now that do it, so people are getting used to it, but a lot of people don't like how that looks. So essentially what Apple did here was they took a mesh and they put it at a really taut, tension right here, and it makes a curve. This here is a curve, but it also pushes in. So essentially your head comes up here and it just sits on the mesh, and it makes no contact whatsoever with these bars. So they essentially created a suspension headband that, doesn't look weird for the most part. Now, I know a lot of people think the AirPods Max does look weird, but the weirdness of the AirPods Max look is the side profile. The front look looks pretty nice, actually. I don't think it looks weird at all. But anyway, so that is the headband. Pads are a weird material. I don't think I've ever felt a headphone pad like this. It's a weird cloth. It's not like a soft cloth. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it just feels like, I felt like chairs and couches, kind of like this cloth material. But it's just like a kind of a coarser, rougher feeling cloth. And then it has the L and R indicators. And then the pads are magnetic, as you can see like right there. And that is what the underside looks like where the driver is. Pads are $70 a pair to replace, which is going to be probably a hard pill to swallow for a lot of consumers, but that's not really unreasonable for audiophile grade headphones. I want to say most higher end audiophile headphones pads are at least that expensive. So that should be something that audiophiles are used to. Other build aspects of it. It uses lightning to charge, which a lot of people are bummed about, I know, because Type-C, everybody wants Type-C all the things, but this uses the lightning cable to charge, which is whatever. I personally don't care that much. On the top of the cup, you have the digital crown, which is borrowed over from the Apple Watch, and this does your volume, so you have volume up, volume down with the turn of the wheel. A single click is play pause, double click for next track, triple click for last track, and then hold down for Siri. And then you have a button here that switches between active noise canceling and transparency mode. So that is the overall build of the AirPods Max. Now, in terms of comfort, the AirPods Max comfort is a bit of a mixed bag. Initially, the headband that I just praised did bother me, but for whatever reason, I got used to it. I don't know why it was giving me hot spots at first, but the more I've used it, it's stopped. I don't know why, but I don't think many people are going to have issues with the headband. The area where people are going to have issues is the clamp force. These things have a ton of clamp. This is one of the tightest clamping headphones that I've ever used. Man, these things have got a lot of clamp. Now, uniquely too, this is spring-loaded. Like, you can see the headband's not flexing, and this has a spring-loaded motion, which I think there is what they're relying on for most of the pivot for the cups or the tilt. But then the headband itself, if you have to bend it, has a ton of clamping force. And essentially, I get pressure points on the side of my head hurt with this very quickly, like 10 minutes. And I know a lot of people I've seen where these have had similar findings to me. And the pad material is also weird again. Where like the foam feels really soft actually. Like if you push it, it's a very unsubstantial feeling foam. But for whatever reason, when it's on your head, it does not compress like you think it would. Like when you push it with your fingers, it compresses very easily. But when it's actually pushed against your face, it doesn't compress that much. And it contributes to the pressure points and the overall pressure on the side of your head. And it's really weird. Like you really can't even describe it. You have to try it. When you try it, you'll understand what I mean. But it's really weird. So yeah, comfort on these pretty much is just not that great in my opinion, mostly due to the clamping force. Now in this review, I'm not going to cover a lot of the normal things that I'd say most tech reviewers are going to cover, like how the actual battery life is and all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to touch over real quick the noise canceling and transparency modes, and then we'll move on into sound. So the noise canceling on these is pretty good. From memory, I don't think it's quite up to par with the Bose QC35-2 or the Sony WH-1000 XM3 or 4. It does a good job at canceling out low hums, computer fans, cars, planes, stuff like that. Like any of those low rumble sounds, it does pretty well with. Other sounds like keyboard clicks, dog barking, car horn, stuff like that, not that good of a job, in my opinion. Like, it's not bad. It's a decent overall, but I don't think it's quite on the level as Bose and Sony in that regard. And then the transparency mode on these is top tier. Apple's transparency mode is so much better than everybody else's transparency mode. It is scarily good. I don't want to say that you can't tell, but you could almost be fooled into thinking you weren't wearing headphones for a second. It is a really, really good transparency mode on the AirPods Max. Okay, so now moving into what everybody's been waiting for, the sound of the AirPods Max. This is probably already 10 minutes in. So, starting with the frequency response. The AirPods Max have quite the bass shelf. They have, I'd say, maybe a 7 to 8 decibel bass shelf down there in that 20 hertz region. And it does slope off very similar to a Harman shelf, and it's basically dead by the time you hit 100 hertz. So it's like a Harman shelf, but just more. It's almost like double a Harman shelf. After that, lower mids are pretty much completely flat. And then moving up into your upper mids. So your overall upper mid region, that like 2 to 5K, is fairly recessed. 3K is a little bit forward, a couple decibels, like 2 to 3 decibels. But the entire region overall is fairly recessed. I'd say maybe 5 or 6 dB above where I personally like it. And then after that, your treble region is a weird mixed bag. Your treble region is almost recessed and not recessed at the same time, where it's very peaky. Like across the treble region, it's just peak dip, peak dip, peak dip, peak dip. And it just sounds kind of grating. So some areas you can sound overly forward, some areas or certain strings, depending on just where it happens to fall in the frequency range, sound a little bit recessed. And yeah, it's weird. It just has a surprisingly peaky and kind of grating treble region. Overall, I wouldn't say it sounds particularly bright, but it can sound dark depending on exactly where in the treble region the instruments happen to fall. So yeah, treble on it is a bit weird. So AirPods Max frequency response is almost kind of like Odyssey. It's a little bit more mid-forward than that, a couple decibels more than most Odysseys. But it's essentially almost like Odyssey with a bass shelf, with like a double Harman bass shelf in terms of frequency response. Okay, so now let's talk detail. So the AirPods Max do not have particularly impressive detail. Now, when we get to the rant part, I'm going to address something I want to say, which is a wireless headphone will never sound as good as a wired headphone for the same price. It can't, because you have to pay for the wireless stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But even compared to its competitors, I don't think it is particularly ahead. It is on par at best with the likes of Bose, Sony, or the AKGs I have sitting here on this table. But it doesn't do anything in terms of overall resolving capability to justify its price. Particularly the treble region, like I mentioned, it's so peaky and grating that strings just sound off pretty much all across the range, and your mids are surprisingly grainy. And then your bass region does not have a lot of texture. Bass is fairly one note overall. It's very boosted, but it doesn't have a lot of texture and doesn't have very good separation, so your bass region is not that great. And then moving into other aspects here, in terms of dynamics, it's fairly compressed overall. I don't think it has particularly great micro or macro dynamics. It's not egregiously bad, but it definitely is fairly compressed sounding overall. Soundstage overall is also fairly mediocre. Not that I was expecting it to have good soundstage, because pretty much none of the closed-back ANC headphones do, but not very particularly great soundstage. Imaging is also very poor. It's very 3-blob. People talk about, like, the Sennheiser HD600 series as being 3-blob. I think this is even more 3-blob than that, where the Sennheisers, at least within the blobs, image really well, where this does not. This is just very left, center, right, and then there's no separation within each of those blobs. So skipping ahead, imaging on them is also poor. But also something I thought that I noticed that was curious, where most headphones, when it images to the left, it's to the left, like you hear it dead center. These seem to almost image like forward a bit, like the image kind of like up here, which is kind of strange. And then as for timbre, very plastic overall. I don't think it sounds particularly natural overall. It sounds very, very plasticky overall in terms of its timbre. And I believe that is everything to talk about here in terms of sound on the AirPods Max. Okay, so I did do my testing with these on a iPad, which I will pull up here on the table in just a second using the latest iOS version. So you don't need to worry about any specific Apple stuff. If you were not using Apple device, I'm just going to tell you right now, I wouldn't recommend these, because you pretty much are getting these for the Apple integration. And I'm going to throw up the iPad here, and I want to talk about the presets for a second and why I don't think they're particularly as relevant as other people said they are or think they are. And then we'll talk about a couple other comparisons here and everything else. So I will transition real quick and see you in a sec. So anyway, so people are talking about these accessibility settings here, and you scroll all the way down to accessibility, then you have AirPods, and then you go here to AirPods Max, and then you go here to audio accessibility settings. And then you go into, even further, you go into headphone accommodations. And now this is where these presets are that everybody's talking about. And it also seems to have a setting in here for like compression or volume normalization, which is what I think this slider is for. So then there's 3 presets here, which is vocal range and brightness, as well as balance tone. Now, balance tone is what is on by default. This is just the default tuning of the AirPods Max. There's also vocal range, which seems to bring forward the mids a couple dB. It makes the treble even darker. And then there is brightness, which brings up the treble even more to where it becomes grating. Now, people are talking about these as if these are like an intended setting that Apple gives you in terms of like an EQ or a tuning. That is not the intended purpose of this. This is in accessibilities in accommodations. This is not, headphone tuning or headphone EQ. These presets are made for people that have, hearing damage and who might have hearing loss in these specific frequency ranges that need it boosted a little bit. These were not intended to be, tuning presets like, if you buy an XM4, you get the app and there's, bass boost, vocal, treble boost. There's specific EQ settings. That's not what this is for. Like I said, these are specifically for people with, hearing damage that need special accommodations. So I really don't think that these should be as covered or as specifically hyped about as they are. And then again, these have the iOS integration. So any Apple devices, so if you have an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac, whatever device is currently playing audio, it will automatically switch to that device and will play the audio without you having to select it, which is very, very nice. And that's the Apple ecosystem that you're ultimately paying for. So yeah, that is the iPad. When you pull them out of the case, they immediately pair to the iPad and it's seamless. And that is pretty much the Apple experience. So that is everything really to talk about in terms of the accommodations and the iPad. So now moving into the rant section of this video, and now I'm betting this is probably gonna be like a 40-minute long video, if not more. But anyway, so let's start with the price of the AirPods Max. I feel like I'm the only one out there that was actually surprised by these being cheaper than I thought. All the leaks of these pretty much said it was going to be $599. It ended up being $550, so it was cheaper than I expected. But everybody's freaking out like, oh, I can't believe Apple is selling a headphone for $550. It's like, you really expected Apple to come out with a headphone that was the same price as the competition? No, Apple's always going to be a premium product and, charge the quote unquote Apple tax, which we're also going to discuss the Apple-isms a little bit later. But the price tag is Apple. And let's be real here. The build of this is way better than the competition, than the $350 stuff. Like I said, the QC35, the WH-1000XM4, the Bose 700, other things like that. Those are all plastic builds, where this is pretty much all metal. This is a better built headphone overall than all of those. Now, because of that too, this is heavy. This is way heavier than pretty much any consumer headphone out there. 384 grams is not unheard of in the audiophile space whatsoever. Like, there's way heavier headphones than this, and there's also lighter headphones than this, but this is, I would say, a mid-weight headphone in the audiophile space, but this is an absolute, paperweight or I don't know, anvil of a headphone in terms of consumer stuff. Most of its competitors are like 250-ish grams. This is 384. And I think that's also going to be something that a lot of normies, or a lot of mainstream consumers, are going to have to get used to. So price on this, I really don't think, is a big factor. Now, does it do anything specifically to justify its price? Honestly, not really. Its justification is the Apple integration. And if you have a lot of Apple devices, I can absolutely see that. It's very, very simple, very, very easy, and you're paying for the ecosystem. And that's ultimately the sales pitch with these. If you are not in the Apple ecosystem, I see no reason to buy this. There are better sounding options for way less. This is a decent package overall, but like I said, you are paying for that ecosystem integration. And then there's also the people out there that are just going after this because it's Apple. Hating on Apple has become like the cool tech boy internet thing to do. And honestly, it's really stupid. I'm not an Apple fanboy by any means. I've owned a lot of Apple products, and I give Apple credit where credit is due. Apple, to this day, makes some great products. And I think this is the strongest their product lineup has been overall in the last decade. But there's people out there on the internet that are like, oh, everything Apple makes is such overpriced garbage. It's like, no, Apple makes some fantastic products. Don't go into this thinking that this is bad just because it's Apple. And Apple is a top player in the audio scene. They have done a lot for the industry and have revolutionized personal audio in a lot of ways. So now, moving into basically my final thoughts here about this headphone compared to the competition. The AirPods Max were overall a disappointment. They are not awful. Like, they are a listenable headphone that sounds okay. But they were not what I was expecting, or the quality that I was expecting from an Apple audio product. Apple has been on on fire recently, making good audio products. Here's the AirPods Pro. This is my personal set. I consider these the best true wireless active noise canceling IEMs on the market. These are great. The Beats Solo Pro is really, really good. It is a very well-tuned active noise canceling headphone. And then Apple's HomePods and HomePod Mini are very good sounding for what they are. I know a lot of people meme on the HomePod for being overpriced, but it sounds good. It sounds better than its competition, which is why it costs more. Apple's laptop speakers are top tier stuff for the laptop market. Like, you don't get speakers like that on Windows laptops. But all in all, Apple has been doing very, very well with their audio products recently, which is what makes this such a disappointment to me. And essentially, the discussion here now is, why did Apple depart from the Harman target? The thing that tied all those personal audio products, that I mentioned, the AirPods Pro, the Solo Pros, and I think the Powerbeats Pro as well, is they are all tuned essentially to the Harman target. Now, again, the Harman target is not the be-all, end-all target out there. I like the Harman target overall. There's a few things about it that I would change, and I don't agree with the people that think it's like the objectively perfect, what humans have to listen to. No, I don't believe it. But I do like it, and it is what you should pick, more or less, I think, for most consumer-focused audio products because it's a very, very safe pick. And that is why things like the AirPods Pro have done, so well, and why the Solo Pro now sounds good for a Beats product because it's tuned to the Harman Target. So this has got double the bass of the Harman Target with none of the mids. And why they decided to do that, I don't know. And then on top of that, these have very middling technicalities. This is going to be a hot take, but I legitimately think the AirPods Pro are more resolving than the AirPods Max. I did some direct A/B, which is actually very easy, by the way. You basically put this on, listen to it, you take it off your head, your music pauses automatically. You put in the AirPods Pro, you squeeze the stem to play, and it plays, and then you take them out, music pauses, put these back on, hit the button, plays. It's very, very easy to A/B with these two. And these I legitimately believe are less detailed than the AirPods Pro. The AirPods Max are just very, very middling technicalities overall. They are at absolute best on par with their competitors, but I don't think they are. I think they are behind in terms of detail and technicality, like I said, but among the Bose, the Sony, and then the AKGs here. So that essentially here brings us to some comparisons. So this is what I consider to be the best sounding true wire or best sounding active noise canceling Bluetooth headphone currently on the market. This is the AKG N700NC M2. I've not reviewed this yet, but essentially what this is just a Harman tuned Bluetooth active noise canceling headphone. It's basically if the K371 was a Bluetooth ANC headphone, it would be this. This is a different driver because there is a K371BT, but you can basically think of this as a Bluetooth ANC K371. That's more or less what it is. Now, this is way worse built overall. The ANC on this is not good whatsoever, but it sounds great. This is tuned right to the Harman Target. It has similar technicalities to the AKG K371, and it's like $170 on Amazon. Now, I would say arguably this is better tuned by default than the Sony WH-1000XM4. That is a lot warmer, but they do kind of intend for you to EQ that with the profiles, but by default this is tuned better. But again, it's just like, why did Apple depart from the Target that was doing so well for them and then make something with such middling technicalities and a weird case? So at the end of the day, I just don't see really any reason to buy these outside of just the Apple ecosystem integration. I wanted these to be good, and people asked me about this, and they've said, "Oh, what do you think about the AirPods Max?" Before I bought them, right when they came out, and I think they would probably be a pretty safe bet to buy. I would be surprised if they weren't good, and lo and behold, I'm surprised because they are not great. Again, they are not awful. They are listenable, and I think a lot of mainstream consumers are going to like them. But compared to their competition, they're just not up there in terms of sound. They're pretty much near the bottom and somewhere in the middle in terms of their ANC. And then the comfort's not very good. They're heavy. The case isn't very good. They have some oversights in terms of design. They are the best built, but they're just technicalities just aren't there, and the tuning is not the worst, but it's not great. So all in all, it's just kind of saddening, honestly, that somehow Apple managed to make something this mediocre with this many oversights. They were coming off great products like the AirPods Pro, but the AirPods Max just doesn't do it for me. And sadly, unless you are very deep in the Apple ecosystem, I cannot recommend the AirPods Max. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this very long review of the AirPods Max. I will link to where to buy these in the description below if you would want to pick up a pair of these. I've also linked my Twitter and my contact email, as well as all other relevant information in the description below. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.